Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for attending. I would like to extend a warm welcome to the Honourable Dominic LeBlanc, President of the King's Privy Council for Canada and Minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade, intergovernmental affairs, internal trade, and One Canadian economy. To the Honourable Wayne Long, Secretary of State responsible for the Canada Revenue Agency and financial institutions, and Mr. David Myles, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture, to the Minister responsible for official languages, and to the Secretary of State for Nature, and Member of Parliament for Fredericton Oromocto. Je souhaite également la bienvenue au colonel Paul Williams, commandant de la base de soutien de la 5e division canadienne à Gagetown, à l'adjudant-chef Dave Hudon, sergent-major de formation, au colonel Loïc Darras, commandant du centre d'instruction au combat, et à l'adjudant-chef Éric Dugas, sergent-major du centre d'instruction au combat. Je tiens à reconnaître que la terre sur laquelle nous vivons, travaillons et nous nous rassemblons aujourd'hui est le territoire traditionnel non cédé de la Première Nation Wolastoqey, qui la considère comme sacrée. May we all live and grow together with respect and gratitude on this land now known as Base Gagetown. Je cède maintenant la parole à l'honorable Dominic LeBlanc. I will now hand it over to the Honourable Dominic LeBlanc for the announcement.
Alors, merci beaucoup, Annie. Colonel, thank you for having us on your base. To you, to your colleagues, it's a huge privilege. C'est un énorme privilège pour moi, avec mes collègues, d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. And to the 6,500 Canadian Armed Forces members, the 1,000 civilians who work here as well at CFB Gagetown, to the veterans that are present with us, and to the military families that are here, thank you, thank you, thank you for your service to Canada. When I was in my first term as a member of Parliament, before some of you were born, I was elected, imagine, in 2000. And in my first term in the House of Commons, I was the Parliamentary Secretary to the then Minister of National Defence. Mr. Chrétien had given me that job. And what an opportunity I had to see up close, including in Kandahar, including in Bosnia, the remarkable work that the women who were serving, the women and men who were serving in the Canadian Armed Forces were doing in those difficult operations. Et j'ai eu le privilège aussi de voir de proche le service incroyable qui continue des femmes et des hommes de nos services militaires ici au Canada, dans les moments souvent les plus difficiles pour notre pays. Et pour ça, je vous remercie. Je vous remercie pour votre service et pour votre dévouement à notre pays. As one of New Brunswick's largest employers, an investment here at CFB Gagetown is also an investment in New Brunswick. And it's an investment as well in a stronger, more resilient Canada. La semaine dernière, mon patron, le Premier ministre, a annoncé que le Canada a atteint la cible de 2% de dépenses en matière de Il a également annoncé des investissements de plus de 3 milliards de dollars dans les infrastructures militaires en Nouvelle-Écosse et ici au Nouveau-Brunswick. Cela représente plus de 1 milliard de dollars pour notre province ici au Nouveau-Brunswick. Parce que les hommes et les femmes qui ont décidé de se dévouer à la défense de notre pays méritent de bénéficier des meilleures infrastructures et du meilleur équipement. Ils méritent le meilleur soutien que nous puissions offrir. Tout d'abord, nous investissons 871 millions de dollars pour recapitaliser le principal centre d'entraînement de l'armée ici à Gagetown. Dans un premier temps, nous procéderons à la reconstruction des routes et à la modernisation du champ de tir anti-char. Nous allons ensuite aménager 65 kilomètres de routes coupe-feu, moderniser les terrains d'entraînement, construire un nouveau centre médical et soutenir la formation aux opérations en milieu urbain. Ces investissements profiteront de milliers de soldats, de cadets et de policiers et d'alliés et des alliés de notre pays qui viennent ici pour s'entraîner dans un environnement réaliste et de très grande qualité. Secondly, we're investing $172 million in new ground-based air defense capability. Now, I shouldn't pretend that I understand exactly what that is. It sounds extremely cool and interesting. Colonel Williams is in a position to explain, and all of you would understand more than me. But think about that, $172 million in a new ground-based air defense capability. The system will allow the Canadian Armed Forces, all of you, to defeat threats posed by rockets, artillery, and mortar munitions, air-to-surface missiles and bombs, and uncrewed aircraft systems. I assume that's what we see every night on the news as drones. Thirdly, and very importantly, we're investing also in the people who serve our country so honorably, like all of you. The upgraded Transition Centre in Gagetown will support Canadian Armed Forces members and their families as they transition to civilian life after their service. It will strengthen access to career, health, and administrative services that you and your families will depend on when your service to our country concludes. This is part of a broader effort on multiple bases, because every member of the Canadian Armed Forces deserves high-quality support as they transition into their next phase of life. Nos investissements, pour conclure, nos investissements ici à Gagetown et dans les installations militaires en Nouvelle-Écosse réaffirment la nouvelle approche du Canada visant à soutenir nos forces armées et investir dans notre défense et notre sécurité collective. Parce que notre plus grande force, ce sont les femmes et les hommes des forces armées canadiennes qui incarnent le meilleur de ce dont le Canada est capable. One last time, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for your remarkable service to our country. Thank you to your families who support you while you're supporting Canada and Canadians. And with that, I'd now like to pass the microphone to my colleague, Secretary of State Wayne Long, who's the Member of Parliament for St. John, New Brunswick as well. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very, very much.
Good afternoon to you all, and thank you on behalf of all Canadians for your service and everything you do. I grew up and spent most of my summers just downriver in the Kingston Peninsula. I remember as a young guy, I went to my dad once, and I was like, it's thundering out Saturday afternoon. I said, thunder's an awful lot. My dad said, that's not thunder. That's the sound of our forces training. That's the sound of our country. That's the sound of our sovereignty. And I've never forgotten his words. It's great to be here. And again, on behalf of all of us, thank you for what you do for our country. We understand the sacrifices that serving Canada bring to you and your families. Our government values the important work you do to ensure a strong and secure Canada, and it's important for us to ensure, that's why we're here today, that you have what you need, what all of you need to do your job. This is particularly true in the rapidly evolving global security environment we live in today. I don't have to tell any of you in this room that things have changed. Our world has changed. It's not the same world that we are in 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. Things have changed. And we need to prepare, and we need to be ready. And as you know, last week, our Prime Minister announced that Canada had achieved its 2% NATO defence expenditure target 5 full years ahead of the original schedule. Now we're making investments to get to 3.5% in defence expenditure and another 1.5% in critical infrastructure like highways and bridges by 2035. And we all know the amount of roads and bridges that are in this base. I think somebody told me at one point there was literally thousands of kilometers of roads just in CFB Gagetown. We're investing $1 billion right here at CFB Gagetown to recapitalize the primary Army training area, introduce new ground-based air defense systems, and ensure our brave and courageous soldiers train on infrastructure built to last into the next century. There's also good news for our troops. These investments allow Canada's new government to continue supporting Canadian industry in creating good construction and manufacturing jobs. And living in a riding that really butts up against Gagetown, living 45 minutes from CFB Gagetown, I know, all New Brunswickers know firsthand the economic impact that this base has on our province, on our GDP. You employ thousands of people here. So again, we know as a government the amazing economic impact that CFB Gagetown has on our province. The Canadian defence industry contributes nearly $10 billion to our GDP, and Atlantic Canada is home to nearly 10,000 direct aerospace and defence jobs, representing 20% of Canada's defence industry employment. We are also providing funding for supporting services for Canadian Armed Force members as they transition to civilian life. The new defence investments we are putting forward are excellent news for our communities, for this region, and for our province, and mainly for you, for all of you here, for our troops who continue to stand up and defend our great country. So again, on behalf of our government, we sincerely are proud to be here. We know the sacrifices you make. We know the challenges you face in a world that is ever-changing. I want to thank you again, everybody here at CFB Gagetown, and I look forward to coming back, hopefully often, with my colleagues and seeing these improvements take shape. So again, thank you, good afternoon, and you have our respect. Thank you for everything that you all do to keep us safe. Thank you.
Thank you all. It is so nice to be here. I'm going to just move this up. I'm a little bit taller. And we'll just make a slight adjustment. There we go. It is great to be out here in Gagetown. I'm the Member of Parliament for Fredericton Oromocto. I've always enjoyed coming out to Oromocto. My mom taught at OHS for about 20 years. As a kid from Fredericton, to cheer for the Blues was a dangerous game, my friends, but we did it. And I've always loved my time coming out to this community. And it's a real pleasure to be out here today for such a historic day. I want to thank the Secretary of State Long to announce this transformative investment in Base Gagetown. Thank you also to the base commander, Colonel Paul Williams, I see you a few times a week now, and I love it every single time. And Chief Warrant Officer David Hudon, merci beaucoup, mon ami. It has been a real pleasure over the last year to work with you and to get to know you. And I've enjoyed it immensely, every visit, and I appreciate all you do for the community. Finally, thanks to all of the members of the Canadian Armed Forces for being here and for your invaluable service to our country. It's an honor to be here with you today. Over the past year, I've had the chance to make many visits to the base, and each time I leave thankful and inspired. Thankful for the immense sacrifices that CAF members make, and inspired by their courage to wake up each day and make those sacrifices for our country. L'un des plus grands privilèges de ma fonction en tant que député de Fredericton-Oromocto est de représenter la base du soutien de la 5e division du Canada de Gagetown, ainsi qu'étant de membre de forces armées canadiennes. C'est l'un des aspects que je préfère dans mon travail. Et je suis pleinement conscient de l'importance de cette responsabilité. I've learned a lot about what it means to serve my community from the folks here at Gagetown. In times of crisis, they are the ones who answer the call, and I've seen them do it with courage and conviction. It's truly inspiring. As the home of the Army and the second largest military base in Canada, Gagetown plays an important role in the CAF on a national scale. Service members from across Canada call Gagetown home, even if just for a short while, as this base is a training hub for the CAF. However, this base also has an irreplaceable role in our community. Ask anyone in Oromocto, and they have a meaningful connection to the base. Families, friends of CAF members know what that life of service entails intimately well. And they themselves make immense sacrifices on a daily basis, and we want to recognize the work that the families and community members do every single day. The base is an anchor to this community, and that's why today's investment is so impactful. I'm excited to be here to help echo the Prime Minister's announcement of over $1 billion in 5 CDSB Gagetown. This investment is transformative. Pour nos membres de forces armées canadiennes, cela permettra d'apporter des améliorations indispensables aux infrastructures et aux équipements de notre base, renforçant ainsi notre capacité opérationnelle à un moment crucial. Les forces qui s'entraînent à Gagetown auront accès à des terrains d'entraînement ultramodernes et bénéficieront d'un accès élargi aux opérations d'entraînement sur l'ensemble du site grâce à la modernisation des infrastructures. What I hope this investment signals to the armed forces here in New Brunswick is commitment. We want our actions to reflect our words. We see the sacrifices you make. We see your courage abroad and in our communities, and we want to make sure you have the resources you need to serve at the highest level. Pour notre communauté, cet investissement est sans précédent. Il stimulera la croissance économique et créera des emplois durables et de qualité dans toute la région. It will activate our local industry, driving innovation, growing the defense industrial base, and creating long-term prosperity here in our own backyard. And it will create good work for local contractors and businesses to help to build the infrastructure facilities here on base. When we talk about historic investments in the armed forces, we also mean historic investments for those communities devoted to serving the armed forces, and that's what we're seeing today. From our first day in office, our government promised to move at unprecedented speed and scale to deliver on its plan to rebuild, rearm, and reinvest in the Canadian Armed Forces. And today we're seeing those promises come to life right here at Base Gagetown. And I could not be more happy to be here with you for that moment. Merci, mes amis. Thank you so much for your service. We'll see you all soon. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, one question, one
Okay, David embarrassed me because he moved the microphone here. It's 2026, David. You can't do that. So to the armed forces here, we'll see if some of the journalists will ask local questions and some will read questions on their phones from their colleagues in Ottawa. So it's sort of like a game for us to figure out. Go ahead. Good.
What is the response to that, and why is it that Canadians are learning this more from the state negotiation from the American side rather than from the American?
So it won't surprise you that I don't share the premise of the question that Canadians are learning more about the state of the negotiations from the U.S. side. This is an annual list that the U.S. trade... I don't know if that's me or you. This is an annual list that the U.S. Trade Representative puts out. A number of the elements on the list yesterday were well known to Canada, and some of them have even been resolved. To talk about the digital services tax, that law abolishing the digital services tax was passed by Parliament a couple of weeks ago. The money's being refunded. So some of this is not a surprise to Canada. We continue to work with our American counterparts. I speak with Secretary Lutnick, Ambassador Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative. There was a high-level meeting this week in Washington between senior officials from Canada and the United States to discuss these and other issues. So none of this is surprising to us, and we continue to work very constructively with our American counterparts, and will continue to do so.
I guess, though, is there a purpose to not sharing as much as we're seeing from the American side? Is that a strategy?
No, the Americans have had these annual lists that they've published for some time. We believe the most effective negotiations in terms of sensitive commercial arrangements are properly done in private. If another party decides to publish lists of things, they can do that. Canada sits down, as we did this week in Washington, and as we will in the coming days as well, to have constructive and positive conversations with the Americans. Our government was elected to do two things: to stand up for Canadian workers and Canadian industries that are affected by what we think are unjustified tariffs. And we were also elected to control what we can control in Canada, to build what we can build here at home. And the fact that we're on the base at CFB Gagetown announcing very significant investments to support the women and men who serve in our armed forces, as David and Wayne said, to support industries in New Brunswick that will benefit from this work, and right across the country. If we met the 2% NATO target, that will be very, very good news for Canadian industry that can build the equipment and the facilities necessary to support the men and women that are here today. So the good news is we're doing both things at the same time. Having discussions with the United States involving our trade relationship, but also investing in and building in Canada things that the government of Canada can directly control, and today's a perfect example.
I'm Jay Fowler with CBC. I will give you my Ottawa question first.
So I told you, they have a question from Ottawa on the phone, and then they'll ask the local question.
And then I've got a local question.
Great.
So, from Ottawa, the U.S. Trade Representative has released his annual report on foreign trade barriers and lists many irritants of Canada. Which ones are standing in the way?
So again, as I said to your colleague, this is not a surprise to us. Some elements on the list that were released yesterday, in fact, have been resolved. Others we're working on with the United States. I don't, again, share the premise of the question that those represent a barrier to the review of CUSMA. Other countries have lists that are much longer than ours. we're working through constructively, as we have been for months, with the Americans, the bilateral issues they raise with Canada. That list is the annual list that they put out publicly. Nothing on that list was particularly surprising to Canada. Some of the stuff on that list was released and discussed by the Americans weeks and months ago. Our job is to continue to do the work necessary to support Canadian industries and Canadian workers. And as recently as this week, we continued high-level collaborative discussions with the American officials.
For a local question, last week Mark Carney announced $1 billion coming from base for upgrades, and announcements for housing upgrades and more housing for military members recently. What is the timeline for those construction projects, those upgrades, and that funding?
So a very good question, and perhaps David, you may want to join me and add something. And of course, the base commander may also want to add something. We understand the urgency of upgrading this infrastructure. The Prime Minister's instructions have been very clear. I know the Defense Minister and my colleague who's responsible for investments in the armed forces have been in meetings where the Prime Minister says if it's going to take 5 months, that's 3 months too long. If it's going to take 3 months, why can't we do it next month? So my understanding is that that work will begin this construction season, but the schedule of when particular pieces, obviously housing, the health center, critical pieces of infrastructure that can be upgraded quickly. My understanding is that'll be amongst the first things that will begin in the coming weeks or in the next few months. But David, if you may want to add something in terms of the precise timing.
Yeah, sure, thank you. You know what, my understanding is very similar to the Minister just mentioned, but I will say that speaking with federal counterparts, it sounds like the conversations regarding housing have already begun in terms of how to engage the modular housing construction industry here in New Brunswick, which is also a massive priority, is to make sure that much of this work can happen locally as much as possible. So knowing that the modular industry has been activated to meet that housing need, the 650 new units that will be built, is great news.
My follow-up will go to whoever can answer best, but we've talked with locals, including the town of Oromocto, the National Buildings Association of Canada, as well as some local contractors, and they say that this is fantastic that we're getting the funding and the things are happening. They foresee the bottleneck being the contractors and the tradespeople that will actually be able to do this. They say it's stretched, the max already. So where are we going to find the people to build this aggressive bunch of upgrades and housing units?
Well, I think that, first of all, it's about being ahead of the game, you know what I mean? Making sure that the lines of communication are really strong between the federal government and the provincial government and local governments to make sure that we know when these investments are happening and when the work is going to happen, and that's the work that we've already been doing. I just had a conversation with this very topic with the province to make sure that we can meet the labor requirements. Because again, our priority is to make sure that this labor can happen locally and that we are engaging people in our communities to do this work. It's absolutely what we want, what we need, and it's going to stand to benefit our community a great deal. So we'll make sure that we are sharing as much information, though, that the contractors aren't caught off guard and they can obviously scale up accordingly to meet that need.
Hi, Matthew Daigle from the Daily Leader. This is a local question, though nothing from Ottawa, I promise. I guess this question is to whoever can answer. Okay, basically, in terms of the upgrades into the transition center, can you tell us a little more about what some of those upgrades would be going to, and what folks could be seeing when they acquire those services?
Yes, so of course I'd be happy to just talk very briefly on the transition center. We anticipate really, I think, opening the doors formally on a new building in the next several weeks. Could be a little quicker than that. This facility is going to give us the opportunity to have a building that's purpose-built to assist military members as they transition out of the Canadian Armed Force. In addition to that, it'll provide a venue for folks that potentially could be reintegrated into field force to do so. So really, it's a positive step forward. I think the infrastructure is going to be thing for the purpose in mind, and it really is going to be a great enabler for our military community and their families as we move forward.
I'd actually like to follow up on that question. Can you explain a little bit more about the ground defense system, the extra infrastructure? What is it that we're going to see really revitalized on the base station in the next, I believe the timeline is 5 to 10 years, correct?
Yes, so I can speak briefly on air defense. First of all, I'll say that for several years, the Canadian Armed Forces have been without a ground-based air defense system. So reintegrating air defense into the Canadian Army is very important and a very positive step forward. What we foresee in the upcoming years is new infrastructure to house new equipment, the stand-up of new units that will focus on that capability, and eventually the arrival of the equipment itself in Gagetown where we'll train. So again, it's air defense is a capability that the Canadian Armed Forces had for many years. We went through a period of about a decade without it. The need, what we have observed on modern conflict worldwide has showcased how important air defense capability is, and we're moving forward with projects to reestablish that capability.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. This concludes today's announcement.